Writing love poetry is one of the main reasons why we pick up a pen for the first time. And, as many can attest, myself included, it is one of the hardest subjects to write well about. Today we're going to explore how to write a love poem that resists using cliché and speaks more directly to the heart. Welcome to the Poetry Vessel's Master Your Craft series, where we guide you through the alchemy of transmuting your poetry from lead into gold. The oldest known love poem is the love song for Shu Sin, dating back to around 2000 BCE from ancient Mesopotamia. It was composed as part of sacred fertility rituals where a king symbolically married the goddess Inanna to ensure prosperity for the year. Another famous example from antiquity are the love poems of Sappho, and although they only survive in fragments and pieces, they're still widely considered masterpieces of love poetry. The tradition still continues strong today, with many contemporary anthologies including Isn't It Romantic? 100 love poems by younger American poets, proving that people still reach for poetry today when wanting to express what matters most. And joining me today is the woman that continues to still my heart every single day, my wife, Rachel. Rachel, let's chat about love.
Well, aren't you cute? Aww.
Just spitting facts over here.
One of the biggest questions that I get is, what is it like being married to a poet? Is your life just full of sonnets and love poems and dedications? Am I Nathan's muse? So, what do you think goes into writing a love poem? What inspires you, Nathan, to write a love poem?
Death.
Wonderful.
I mean, obviously you, my romantic impulse, my longing, my joy, my fear of death, my loves, my lusts, my confusion of all things filter into love. And the poem is this compulsion to express something and sing something because it's so intense.
It is intense, and I think even just thinking about the endeavor of writing a love poem, I know that one of our most watched videos is still on how to write a love poem, and I think that's because so many people struggle with this process. They don't want to sound cringy, they don't want to sound gross. They want it to be well received by the person that they like or love. So, whether you're single or not, I'd love to break down your best tips for how to write a love poem and how people can start writing a love poem today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing to say is to express yourself like authentically. You don't want to like completely steal language from somewhere else or just use cliches, you know. I think of it like, how would you tell someone a secret? How would you tell their heart something if you were whispering to the beloved's heart, your beloved's heart? How would you say something? And that might seem a little bit abstract, so let me make it slightly more concrete. How would you find a way to say I love you without even using those words? Through a description or a moment or an observation. So, one of the best tips I can give at the beginning, anyway, is find a feeling that's authentic and find a way to say it that hasn't been said before.
Hmm. And where should a person start with this? Like, is it best to get a notepad and start listing all of the different things that they love about somebody? Or, like, what's a good way to get those creative juices flowing?
That's an idea that can work for some people. I'm a big fan of stream of consciousness. Write as fast as you can without thinking for 5 minutes and time yourself. And then once you got that, find different things that are within what you streamed that feel like, oh, that feels a bit different. Oh, that was an interesting leap. And start working on the poem that way.
Yes, and I also want to talk a little bit about cliches because I think love poems can be some of the worst offenders, especially around Valentine's Day and Hallmark cards. And what would you recommend to avoid cliche in your writing?
There's a couple of things. I mean, you don't want to sound desperate. Please, 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 please love me.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy because we're already at that stage. But think about your love for someone and just pay attention to the world around you. Something can leap out to you about it. If you're walking the beach, something to do with the ocean or the swirling on a shell, or if you're walking through a forest, it can be the pattern on the bark. The sound of a leaf kind of crunching, like anything that can emerges to you, and go, ah, there might be something in here that's metaphorical that I can then translate towards being like love. I would ground the feeling of love in an observed image.
I think that's really good advice. And one of the other pieces of advice I really like that you mentioned in our former video was about embracing imperfections. And I feel like that goes along well with what you're saying in terms of noticing things. Like, can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of love poetry?
Yeah, I think the sense that love is imperfect and it can be blissful, it can be messy, it can be like your love contains like all things within it. So I think the poem can honor some of the multifaceted natures of that expression. So when I think about embracing imperfections, yes, when we're in love, especially if we're in the honeymoon period and we want to call out to the moon and the mountains with how in love we are, we want to stand there. What's it we say? We want to shout from the rooftops this thing, which is a perfectly fine impulse. And maybe that exaggeratory impulse can be honored and you can write it in any way that you like. But also just find other ways to do it. Like for example, perhaps I would write something, maybe you're sitting somewhere and I see you through a window and you're doing something really simple. Maybe you're cutting a lemon to put in your water. And a whole poem I can have can focus on just your hand and the lemon. So it's brought it to something particular and it's gone to something that isn't as obvious. Yes, I want to sing about your eyes and your lips and your face, which again is perfectly fine to do, but you can also find things that are quieter, more subtle, more strange, more unique.
Yeah, and let's focus on some real world examples then where context that you've written a love poem, because I think it could be really helpful to somebody else that's trying to do this. One of the most common examples that people are writing a love poem besides Valentine's Day is for a wedding or in their vows. Can you talk a little bit about your experience helping people with their vows and writing poems for weddings?
Yeah, great question. I think vows is a really good place to start because we don't always think of our vows as poems, but they are. They're poem promises. And they often have metaphors and declarations and rhythm and often the repetition. I vow to can come up over and over. There's a very poetic nature to them just by the fact that they're written creatively and they're written for the intended audience of the other half, the soon to be spouse, but also for whoever's watching as a declaration, poetic declaration of love. In my experience helping people write vows, I help them find ways to say things uniquely because I want them to land as strongly as possible. So the other person will tell me how they feel, and I'll be like, how about, and make some suggestions and say, like, let's explore this a bit further. And then they find themselves deepening how they're expressing love. As for wedding poetry is hard to write. It is difficult to write a poem for someone else's wedding. It takes a lot of time. You've got to observe them. You've got to pay attention to who they are. You've got to like be really keenly understanding of who the audience might be. And I think this goes for any poetry, but you've got to be really careful not to make it about yourself.
That is a really good point, and I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, the last thing you'd wanna do is get up there and make it about, you and I as opposed to the couple at hand as much as we do love each other.
Absolutely. And this is another thing, like if I write you a love poem, it also shouldn't just be about me.
Mm.
Again, it's like that's saying like the please love me. It's like if I'm writing a love poem, it's like I want to like give a, it's like my own feeling and to express how I'm feeling, but gift an experience that you feel connected to me. It's like the love poem is about connecting. So if it's too much about me, it's too much about how I feel in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're pulled into it. Maybe it's too desperate, or it can kind of be a bit. I don't think it would be as good as if I said things and you're like, oh, look at all the details he's noticing. So without me saying too much more, when you're on the receiving end of a love poem, what do you look out for?
You read my mind with, with that, because I was going to talk about being on the receiving end of these, and it is about connection. That, if I feel like you've captured and you've noticed some special detail about me, maybe it's like the way I laugh or a certain crinkle in my smile or something I do that shows my love or something. Like it makes me feel like you're paying attention. And as a partner, that obviously that feels really good that you see me and you notice me and that I not only feel seen and loved by you, but that I feel that connection between us, that you understand me well enough as well to not write me a poem that I'm going to be like, that was really cringy. Yikes.
Do better.
But that speaks to me on a different level, like I guess on my soul, as cheesy as that sounds. But
Love it.
that's what I would say, being on the receiving end of love poems, which is one of the most wonderful kinds of poems to receive from someone.
And there are times I'm having it right now where, like, your three dimensionality like pops out, and I think this happens in connected communication. And I'm wondering if, when I'm writing a poem that I realize is a love poem, I don't always know. I don't always intend to write that. Sometimes it's just like, oh, this has got this theme in it. It's kind of like the version of this like three dimensionality conversational relationship, but happening between like me and the page, the poet and the page. And then when I realize that it is a love poem and I start shaping it, I start thinking more specifically of, I'm going to read it to you.
Mm.
So that changes how I express things. And anyone that says I only write for myself, if you only write for yourself, you keep it to yourself. If you share it, you're using language. Language is communication. Language is social. If you share it, it's for others too. So the love poem, you should consider the reception from the other person and how, like you said, how you might receive it.
Yeah, what's their thing? How might they react to it? And it's scary to be vulnerable and to speak from your heart and share something like that with someone, but I think it can also be deeply connecting when done with the right spirit and with the right words. I'm not sure if you're looking to give away one of your trade secrets with wedding poetry specifically and what you ask from the couples that you're going to write one about. Are you willing to share that tip?
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm an open book. So I always ask the couples, each individual, to send me 5 things that they really love about each other, because then they bring their unique attention to each other. And then when I've got that, it's like, okay, I attempt to distill most of, if not all of, what it is that they say about each other. And it might not be direct, but there's enough in there to go, because I know by saying 5 things, they have to think deeply and I think more poetically about their love. So even though I might go off and read and write it, they are also co creating it by telling me these things.
And I think that's so cool that it's specific things, even when you're writing a love poem for someone else, that it's their specific love and specific details from their life that have made their way into the poem. So I think that's really cool. One of the other things that I would recommend to someone out there in terms of inspiration for love poetry, of course, is reading love poetry. So Nathan and I have a video, if it's not already out, it'll be coming out soon, reading love poetry to each other. So that's been one of the best things I think in terms of inspiration, getting your head thinking this way is read some of the great love poets. Read it with your partner even and see what they respond to and what they like. That might give you a good indication of what they enjoy in terms of love poetry. And it's a really fun romantic thing to do with each other.
Yeah, and you can only be helped by reading more and seeing more expressions and wide expressions of love because there's so many. And I also just want to say this, I don't want to ostracize any of our single viewers out there or people who aren't even interested in relationships or are in, relationships with multiple people. I would just say that you also can write love poems about things you love. There's all these different forms of love. It's not always romantic. Obviously, in the English language, we use the word love for everything. But in Greek, for example, you'd have like Eros, and you'd have the other ones are just like dropped out of my brain as I said that then, but they have multiple words for love. So you can have love of family, love of God and religion, love of romantic partner, love of an object, love of an animal, love of a tree,
Love of self.
love of self. So there are all these different ways in which you can express love, and it doesn't have to be just romantic. Though, even let's say a poet like Rumi would write romantically about the beloved, but he's talking about God. So you can also use romantic love in other contexts too. So it's available for everyone. Love is a universal experience, and you love and can feel love and can express love and read love poetry regardless of your relationship status.
One of your other pieces of advice that I also wanted to talk about was closing with impact. And I can't help but hear the way you said it in the original video, which still makes me laugh. If you haven't seen that, go watch that after this video, please. You go close with impact.
Yeah, I do the Matt Berry.
Impact.
Impact.
Too much Matt Berry.
I know, I've been watching too much of that. Step 5, close with impact.
This is the way we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
I feel like I should do a whole script on the poetry of Matt Berry. That would actually be great.
His intonations are perfect.
Get your point, stranger.
So how can you close with impact on a love poem? On a love poem? In a love poem?
I always wish I can remember the poet who said this, and for some reason I look it up and it goes again. It's leave on an image and don't explain it. Again, you don't have to do that, but there's so much power when you just leave, you trust the reader or the listener or the beloved with the last image that makes you go, it doesn't, love's loop doesn't close. You don't say, okay, I've expressed love, that's it. There's always more. This is why there's so many love poems, and it's probably the most written about genre. I'm going to guess next to poems about death and dying.
Yeah, I'd wager so as well. Even just looking online, that's one of the most searched things for in relation to poetry. I also want to focus on how you share a love poem with someone. So maybe you've watched this video, you've watched our other video on how to write love poems. You've written your perfect love poem following all of our tips. There's about 5 tips in the other one. How do you go about sharing your love poem with someone?
Start with permission. Would you like to hear a poem is a really important question. They might be busy doing something. Maybe they're partway through cooking or, trying to get the dog to sit. And you're like, do you want to hear my love poem? Not the right context. So make sure there's a good context for it and that it's going to be best received. And then hopefully you've practiced. And if you haven't practiced, try and practice, because then when you go to read it, you'll know the tone and you'll know what will suit the occasion best. So understanding them is not just writing a poem that you think that they would really enjoy from you. It's also knowing how to then express that and the way in which you express it. So just be intentional, I think, is the concluding way.
And I think the moral here is there's no right way to share it. It's between you and whoever you're sharing it with. And whether that's giving it to them in a handwritten note or a message or reading it or whatever it may be, as long as it's right for you and the context and the situation, then I think that's all fine.
And it is fun. I've read love poems at an open mic when Rachel's been there as well, or during a set when I'm a featured poet at an event. And it is really fun watching people kind of like turn and look to see what Rachel's reaction is
As
to
red
the
as
love
this
poem.
outfit.
Yeah, sometimes you'll embarrass, but other times you'll find it sweet. And like, so there's something, I think, tongue in cheek sometimes when I do it. It's like, I love reading it, but I also kind of like watching you be a bit like, you know, funnily uncomfortable. Not completely uncomfortable. If you're like, stop reading that in public, I'll probably listen.
Well, let's hope.
So what do you think? Are you struggling with a love poem? Are there any things that you're trying to get right or afraid of or want to help overcoming cliche? Let us know in the comments and we look forward to reading them.
And if you love The Poetry Vessel, you can join us on our free newsletter. It's www.thepoetryvessel.com/sign up, or you can check out our membership options on Patreon and on YouTube. Thanks so much. We love you, and we'll see you next time.